half boy, half god, all hero. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast where we rank every book in the Percy Jackson mythological universe. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga, and today we're discussing the Demigod Files.
Yes, so this is a very special episode where we talk.
It's an after-school special
where we talk about this little 100-page book, and that is because Clara unfortunately couldn't make it this week. So we were originally going to do Battle of the Labyrinth, but we're going to be pushing that back a little bit, and we figured, hey, if Clara's not here, but we still want to put something out, this little companion book it's a good time. We don't necessarily need Clara for rankings and such like that.
It is beneath her.
So this book, if you don't know, has a bunch of different little short stories. We're going to recap them all, talk about our feelings. But if you're new to the podcast, here's a quick few pieces of housekeeping. Okay. This is both an audio and video podcast. Audio services around the globe. Video at youtube.com/DoingOK. That's DoingOK. And usually we talk about one book in the Riordan verse every other Thursday. Now, because Clara is having a few weeks where she needs to be away, and because it's going to be the holidays, we are going to be back January 7th with Battle of the Labyrinth. So we're taking a couple of weeks off for not putting things out on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve.
We ask our listeners to please rate us or review us wherever it is that you're getting the podcast, or drop a like on the video. A big thank you to Brit9221 for your very kind review of us on Apple.
Yes, that was great. Thank you so much, and we always appreciate hearing from you guys. Also, if you want to be part of feedback in future podcasts, you can email us at ourpodcastfeedback@gmail.com, or leave us a comment down below in the video. But this is a special episode where we're going to talk about these demigods and their files.
And all the paperwork they have to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this companion book takes place between books 4 and 5. So I know we haven't talked about Battle of Labyrinth yet, but we read that in preparation for today. And it's not necessarily it's certainly not a core book. Definitely not necessary. But I had never read this before, and there are a bunch of things in these short stories that come back in later books. And the couple of them, when I was reading the later books, I was like, what? Where did this come from? Well, now I know. So interesting stuff. And so because of that, I am going to include some minor spoilers for upcoming books to point out things of how some of these short stories set things up in later books. It's not going to be anything crazy. And I mean, in my opinion, I don't think it's crazy spoilers.
No, this stuff that you've told me, it's really not a big deal. It's more just yeah, really.
But I feel like not including that is giving this book only half of the discussion. Because if you just look at the stories and not look at how it ends up building things up for later, you're kind of missing out on part of the discussion.
Yeah, because this is canon. Yeah. It's part of the universe, so it's worth discussing it in that context, even if we don't know about all of it yet.
So, what did you think of this?
So, I haven't quite figured out how to put this into words, which isn't very helpful for a podcast, but the closest thing I can say is that this was not meant for the other readers. This is meant for younger readers of the Percy Jackson series
who want more fun things,
right? Which doesn't really make sense for people who are growing up with the books. Yeah. So it's one of these things that some marketing publicity guy was like, hey, yo, Ricky, you need to get in with the kids. Here, we're going to write a camp file, and you can knock it out in a weekend. No worries. Yeah. And Riordan just kind of I did the research on this god, this creature, this creature. Okay, this will work together.
Yeah. We should point out that in addition to these 3 short stories we're going to talk about, it has stuff like word jumbles describing what each of the gods is like and things like that. So it's also just a not an activity book, but like, again, it's a companion book.
So this copy in particular, this lovely cover is also a tie-in from the classic film that we gave a raving review for.
Ranting
review, yes, correct. And I just want to point out that there's like a little poster thing in the middle. Yeah. And my favorite is the worst Sean Bean performance poster ever. Like, he wasn't even that important in the movie.
Yeah. It's funny.
But you can have a poster of him if you want, looking
and there is the non-movie version. This was just the one that was cheaper.
I wonder why. I know, but my point is that this kind of like thing
it's just
summarizes
it's just banking off of the appeal of the franchise. That said, like I said, that's why initially I ignored this book, but like there is canon stories in it. And I will say, when you talk about like, oh, you can knock this out in a weekend, these feel like either first drafts or like, oh, he's just toying with some ideas, which then he picks up on later and goes into more detail. It also kind of, I'll say, especially the first two to me, feel like fan fiction.
Yes.
They feel like close to what Percy Jackson is, but like just a little bit off, and a little too like rosy. The third one I think is the closest to being the same quality of the regular books. It's still not like amazing, but it's pretty solid.
To me, the third one almost feels like he wanted these as this adventure as part of one of the books, but he couldn't figure out how to make it work. It felt almost like maybe he wrote the other ones to justify like the existence of publishing the third one.
Potentially.
This is all speculation, obviously. I have no founding, but you're absolutely right about the fanfic thing.
All right, so should we get into
Actually, that's an insult to fanfic. I've read fanfic like 10 times better than those two short stories.
My point being like what you would think of as fan, like just not exactly in the right characters' voices, not particularly like a young fanfic writer who's just like kind of like doing like an okay facsimile of what Percy Jackson is, but not quite there.
I want them to be friends. I want them to have more adventures. That's kind of what they do. All right.
All right. Should we get into the first?
Let's do it. I think we've sufficiently criticized them overall. So the first one is Percy Jackson and the Stolen Chariot. Percy is in school when he spots Clarice being attacked by feather arrow throwing birds.
Crazy birds.
Crazy birds.
I don't even know if we get a name for them. But they're just crazy birds.
Yeah. Just random New York pigeons. After the two of them have defeated the birds, Clarice reluctantly reveals that she is supposed to be taking care of Ares' war chariot and needs to get it back to Ares' temple by sundown. However, her immortal brothers, Deimos and Phobos, gods of terror and fear respectively, have stolen the chariot.
Yeah, so like the main points of this particular short story are we're getting a little bit more Clarice, and we get the introduction of Deimos and Phobos, or whatever their friggin' names are. And I think this could have been, like, all of those elements to me, I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like, the gods of fear. They could have done, like, a fun Halloween thing. I think that could have been cooler. And I like Clarice, but it's just very, very short and simple. But why don't you continue that?
Yeah. Phobos comes to taunt Clarice and hints that they'll find the chariot at the Staten Island Zoo. On their way, they encounter Deimos, who's riding a sea serpent, but they quickly defeat both the god and the monster and continue on their way. Yeah, they're both easily defeated in these, like, one-on-one standoffs.
Yeah. So I think that, to me, my biggest issue with this is how pathetic they seem and how not scary the god of fear is. Once the Percy and Clarice overcome their like powers of fear, they can like easily like beat them in battle. And that I'm okay with if it was like, oh, once you get past their like scary faces, you realize fear isn't actually that big a deal. The problem is that I never felt like he was scary to begin with.
Right.
And so like him like looking like this like stupid punk kid and being like just like a lame bully, like especially in contrast to when we go to the underworld in the later one, and like we see the god of ghosts and stuff like that. I'm like, this just seems lame. And that's part of why it feels like a little too rosy and a little too fanficky to me.
So another thing that kind of makes it lame in that way is the fact that the entire reason that they even stole the chariot from Clarice is because this is a rite of passage that only male sons of Ares are supposed to have. So it just kind of, again, makes them so cartoonish and pathetic. Of like, we're just bullies bullying a girl because we think girls are stupid. And then, it's the thing with bullies of they just want their power. And once you take that away from them, then they're nothing. It's like, that's not how the rest of this universe really works.
I just feel like if they had it be something like, they're like terrifying creatures, and when you like pull off their mask, they're actually just like weak underneath. That I feel like would have fit what they're going for better than this.
Yeah. Well, at the zoo, they find the chariot and face the two gods again. Phobos and Deimos show Percy and Clarice their worst fears. Percy fears the great prophecy and failing his friends, of whom Clarice is one. And Clarice fears her father. Which makes sense. By overcoming the illusions, however, Percy and Clarice easily defeat the two gods, like we talked about. They return the chariot, and Clarice starts to warm up to Percy as a friend-ish. So, I mean, this is really a companion to Sea of Monsters in a lot of ways. It is reinforcing, hey, she's afraid of her dad. It's reinforcing that Percy is going to be there for her, whether she likes it or not, and she starts to, like, grudgingly respect that. It just is unnecessary, I think, is the ultimate thing. So this feels like a former chapter draft of Sea of Monsters, where maybe after having done research on the children of Ares that are gods, Riordan was like, I can't make this work, whatever, we can cut them. And he's like, oh, I can use this later. Like I could see them have been like bullying her throughout her journey or something. So as far as the minor spoilers go, we do see these gods again to a certain extent, very different circumstances, and not for quite a while. Would you say better circumstances? Yes. Okay. This is the one where it's like, oh, it's interesting that they introduced them here, but it actually, honestly, almost not reading this makes it better. Okay, I will tune it out for when we get there. Okay, so I think that's all we can say about that. I mean, I like Clarice, but like I said, like I don't feel like it necessarily gave me further insight to her character. We already kind of saw her like better side when it came to like Chris Rodriguez, and even I already got the vibe that Percy had this respect for her and a growing friendship, and maybe her in return, like they were all on the same side. We don't need them literally fighting together in this way. All right, so the next one is Percy Jackson and the Bronze Dragon. Percy and Beckendorf face off against their crushes, Annabeth and Selena, in Capture the Flag. Ooh, the most bloody, violent game. Beckendorf, a son of Hephaestus, awkwardly talks to Percy about his crush on Selena and suggests that Percy should ask Annabeth to the fireworks. Ooh, the fireworks. The hottest event of the 4th of July camp. Yes. During the game, they stumble across a Myrmices anthill and a bronze dragon head that belonged to an automaton that used to protect the camp. Yes. Selena and Annabeth capture Percy while Beckendorf tries to retrieve the head from the ants. They overwhelm him and take him to their lair instead of the head. Uh-oh. They want to snack on him. If you ask Selena, he is quite a snack. Oh, baby. Percy and Annabeth and Selena realize they need help in order to save Beckendorf, so they find the dragon's body and repair him. The dragon blasts open the ant's nest, and the ants all attack the dragon. Meanwhile, Percy, Annabeth, and Selena rescue Beckendorf. As they escape, the dragon turns on them. Percy distracts the dragon until Beckendorf can jump on the dragon's back and temporarily deactivate it. Selena is very relieved that Beckendorf is alive and happily accepts his invite to the fireworks. Oh my God. Putting so much pressure on Percy. Once they get back to camp, it turns out that Capture the Flag game has not ended yet, and Annabeth puts them in Capture the Flag jail. Wah, wah. Before Annabeth leaves, she asks Percy out to the 4th of July fireworks, but she quickly runs away before Percy can answer her. Yeah. Will they, won't they? I don't know.
So, yeah, I mean, I think this one to me is the most like, it has some good stuff. It's better than the first one, but it is very like fanficky, like, ooh, they're going to go to the fireworks.
I'm glad that it does give like Beckendorf and Selena more stuff to do, including Selena being like kind of more actiony because, you know, the children of Aphrodite haven't done much. Yeah. They're not even like using their like
weapons and things.
Well, no, I meant more like they're not even using their like powers of charm and whatever to like achieve stuff, like maybe turn spies back to the side of the campers and the gods. Like they're just kind of there. So the fact that she's able to like fight for something and is willing to get dirty and overcome her nature for love is like it's a good thing. Yeah, it's needed.
I think there's a lot of good things in here. I agree. Like Beckendorf and Selena are important to the fifth book. So having this little thing here of their connecting and also showing you a little bit about each of them before you read the fifth book, I think will improve your feelings about the fifth book. And the Bronze Dragon is incredibly important for the future of the series. He's right on the cover of the Heroes of Olympus, the Lost Hero. Additionally, the Myrmicas play a big role in the first book of the Apollo series, where they have to go back into the anthill. It is kind of cool seeing these little threads that he did have going early on, and whether he was setting them up here or it's just his first sort of stab at it, and he was like, "That's a good idea. I'm gonna use it to a better degree later." I definitely think there's some cool stuff there.
I have a feeling that with the Bronze Dragon being so important later on, he really was just like, I don't feel like writing an intro, but I want maybe he wanted to use it sooner, or thought he would use it sooner, and then ended up not. It's just clear that he did his work, he did his research, and that this was supposed to always be like a grand universe. So yeah, for all my crapping on this of being like discarded chapters, there's still effort in them.
I think the later books do a good job with this story as far as like, I didn't feel like I was necessarily missing something having not read the short story before, but it does add, like, it fills in the blanks in a nice way. So like, I think this is a good, like, again, good companion thing here to have that. Whereas when we're going to get into the third one, which I like a lot, feels almost like necessary. And it's weird that it wasn't in the main stuff. But as far as, before we move on to that, I do want to just say that, like, another thing that's a big deal, I think, in this short story is how capable Annabeth is. And I think that even though to a certain degree it's a little on the nose, and that's part of the fanfickiness to me, she is legitimately very capable in this in a way that we don't always get to see. And I did appreciate that.
I think especially, I mean, I know we haven't formally discussed Battle of the Labyrinth, but you know, when we discussed it off camera, we were like, oh, it's a book about Annabeth's quest, but she doesn't do like
that much,
so much for someone who, you know, she doesn't do as much as, like, for example, Clarice does in Sea of Monsters, which is a little weird. So this being kind of like an epilogue chapter to Battle of the Labyrinth helps.
All right, the Sword of Hades,
our favorite. So Persephone, we've been wondering where she was, tricks all three children of the big three, Percy, Thalia, and Nico, into coming into the underworld. She tells them that a demigod spy stole Hades' powerful new sword, and they must retrieve it before the sky escapes the underworld.
The sky?
The spy. She just wants us to
Uranus is going to escape the underworld.
They interrogate Sisyphus, fight a group of demons of disease that end up hurting Percy pretty badly, and cross the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. After a run-in with Melino, the goddess of ghosts, they discover the thief, Ethan Nakamura. Ethan used the sword to raise the titan Iapetus. When Percy fights against Iapetus, he flings him into the river Lethe, thus causing the titan to lose all his memories. Percy tells Iapetus that he is his friend Bob, and Iapetus believes him, now completely harmless. When they return the sword, Hades is very unhappy and threatens Persephone to never disobey him again.
Never again.
Turns out that Persephone requested the sword against Hades' orders to equalize the power of the big three. Percy and Thalia return to the world above, but Nico stays behind to find Iapetus a new job in the underworld and to work with his father, Hades.
All right.
This is our shortest recap.
Yeah.
But
a lot going on.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I really truncated that. But so there's a lot of cool stuff in here. I mean,
Yes.
just being in the underworld in general.
Love it.
Provides a lot of cool things. Having Persephone, this is honestly her biggest role ever in the books so far of what I've read.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty cool. I love the idea of gathering the big three kids.
Yeah.
That's fun. Good to see more Thalia. Good to see her, like, you know, thinking about her mom and all that stuff. Giving Ethan more to do. Introducing a side Titan. And I think there's lots of, like, I really like the Sisyphus stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anything? What are you thinking?
I just think that, again, it just feels like there's so much effort in this. Like, this feels like a really important chapter or story.
Yeah.
Because you have, like, Percy reckoning with, like, Thalia leaving and how she's immortal now and a hunter. And then, again, like you said, Thalia continuing her difficult relationship with, like, her mom and her regrets with that. And more important than anything, you have, like, Nico and his relationship to Hades and also his stepmom Persephone. And, like, fleshing out that. We talked about this also offline about how, because of the nature of it being, like, Percy Jackson's point of view, we didn't really get to see Nico
meeting Hades for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. And being claimed or having a moment like that. He's just, like, going in and out of the underworld. He's there. And we were just supposed to take that at face value. And even though we're still dropped in the middle of this relationship, at least we finally get to see it more in practice. So that's great.
Yeah. And I think the actual, like, adventure is fun. They do enough different things that it doesn't feel super truncated. And so I think that the places where this story are interesting, and it gets into the minor spoiler stuff, is how, like, necessary it feels. And the biggest thing here is that Bob Iapetus plays a very pivotal role, like, 4 books from now. And when he was introduced, yes, they, like, vaguely explained where he came from in that book, but, like, they do it as though, like, I should like, they're just reminding me. And I was like, what the heck? I had no, what is this? And so
why is there a Titan named Bob?
So yeah, that was definitely, I was like, did I forget something? It was, so that was interesting. And on some other ways, I'm like, it's called the Sword of Hades, and they make such a big deal out of the sword. The sword isn't important. So I'm like, in that way, I'm like, well, I guess it wasn't that important. Like,
well, that's the thing. I just feel like they needed a reason to get these 3 down there and to maybe use Persephone, because she could be cool. Like, it's interesting that she is this, like, mastermind in her own right, that she is, like,
Lady Macbeth.
Yes. Thank you. But at the same time, they don't, like, really do justice for her either, because we're just dropped in the middle of, like, oh, she turned Nico at one point into a dandelion, apparently. Like, what? That just happened, and we're off screen, whatever.
Like, that's the thing where I enjoy Persephone in this short story, but I do think that her being in a short story kind of hurts the character, because they don't have enough to really explore their version of the Persephone-Hades relationship. Because I'm like, so how are we supposed to feel about, like, is he her, like, slaver? Like
she calls him her master and husband.
the fact that he says, like, don't disobey me, but, like, also she's kind of tricking him, and I'm like, so, like, because, you know, like, in the movie, as much as we have issues with the movie, like,
I wanted to talk about that.
It was very clear that it was like, oh, she has been mistreated and she's, like, abused and stuff. And then I feel like in the 5th book, where we do see Persephone more, it more just seems like, oh, this is my annoying husband or whatever. So,
So, about the movie. So, the movie has this, like, ridiculous quest for the Black Pearl.
I think you're thinking of the wrong movie.
Whatever. Better movie. these pearls that will like bring people out from under the underworld and look at that. But in this one, she gives them, when they're completely done with the quest, when Hades has stormed off, Persephone gives them these flowers. I think they're red roses. And she's like, crush them and you'll be walking amongst the humans again. And I'm like, so did they just take that inspiration? Did they take Persephone, the mastermind, the creator of the escape, and just decide to be like, this is more interesting than anything that happened in the Lightning Thief. Let's go with it. I'm like, why? Yes, this was a good short story, but that wasn't like the best part of even this short story.
So I as much as I do enjoy her in this, I do enjoy the idea that it's like, again, it turns on its head. It's like, oh, of course, Hades is the power-hungry one, blah, blah, blah. But, like, actually, he wasn't going to... Like, he's good at not breaking the rules. So I like how that goes. But, again, I wanted more of an understanding of how this interpretation of Greek mythology was interpreting their marriage.
Interpretations of Hades and Persephone's marriage is, like, one of my favorite things to read about, because I also think that for every era of like literature and art, there is a new and different interpretation of it. And right now we're in a really cool one.
With Hades Town.
Yes, with Hades Town, because Dan knows how obsessed I am with this musical, and I would love for us to somehow like be able to react to it, or the soundtrack, because that's just like a very modern version, even though it also takes place in a timeless way. So kind of getting to these things were published very close to each other, I guess you could say. So for me, it's this thing of like giving Persephone agency was already in vogue, coming into the, and coming into now. So
there's definitely a lot of cool stuff. It's not perfect, but I 100% like endorse reading this one. Like, it's worth it. It's a fun read. It has some good action, some good comedy, some good character interactions. It helps set up sort of where Nico is at the beginning of this next book. It's
a great Nico chapter, again, helping his relationship with Percy, considering they were still not always on the same page during Battle of the Labyrinth. So,
and it's always great to get more Thalia. We don't get enough of her. So All right, that basically wraps this guy up.
I don't know, Dan. I thought you might want to do a word jumble.
Oh, okay. Word jumble time.
We're not. No.
All right. So, I mean, we probably will cover the other companion books as we go. We shall see. We did get the Heroes of Olympus one when we get there. But next up is Battle of the Labyrinth, January 7th. Hopefully we'll have Clara back for that. Thank you guys so much for watching / listening. And I hope you have a hoppity
hip hopping holidays.
I hope you have a hip hopping holiday. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.